Today we celebrate generations of church members who dreamed big dreams and donated their time, talent, and treasure to build the structure we call Redmond United Methodist Church. We cannot celebrate our building's history without first acknowledging the Duwamish, Stillaguamish, and Coast Salish peoples who lived, worked, and cared for the land on which our church is built. For 125 years, our UMC has benefited from this land. Although it is unclear how the 13 families acquired the first parcel of land in 1908, historical documentation notes that the land on which our church now stands was gifted to us in 1926 by the prominent Perigo family. We struggle with the bittersweet nature of this gift because as we celebrate our church buildings, we also know the cost to the native peoples. This tension is the backdrop to our growth as a congregation. Being grounded in our past means we don't turn away from the hard truths. Instead, we listen and learn, repair and grow. And so, we take this moment to honor with gratitude the land itself, as well as the local tribes and their leadership. They are still here, and listening to their voices is imperative to our work as we look thoughtfully toward the future, making amends and building God's beloved community along the way. For our church community, our building is more than just a structure made of brick and wood. It is a home away from home, a place that reflects our priorities and values, a sacred space filled with realized dreams. In 1908, 13 families' dream came true when they funded and built our first church building. Having outgrown their Sunday worship in individual family homes, our earliest church members not only built a new building, they built connection with the greater Redmond community, welcoming the town's school overload and providing school lunch in their new little white building on 164th and Redmond Way. Just imagine the church ladies' excitement on that first day of school lunch making as they tied their aprons around their waists. A new building, a new mission, a feeling of happiness and invitation in their new home away from home. And then, in 1926, 30 years after the church's 1896 incorporation, this original little white building was pulled by horses to our current downtown location on the corner of 80th and 166th. What a sight that must have been for the church family, mixed with feelings of nervousness for the structure and excitement for the future. Soon after the move, the little white church was too little for worship, potlucks, Sunday school, and social outreach. So, once again, the congregation donated time, talent, and treasure to fulfill another dream, to add on to their building, so they could continue to draw the circle wide to worship, play, and serve in downtown Redmond. With more foundation, more wood, some brick and mortar, and a lot of human power, the chapel was constructed next to the little white building, and the little white building became what we now call the Swan Room. And then, in the 1950s, the thriving church no longer had space for Sunday school. So the congregation made another dream come true. An additional building was planned, blueprinted, funded by the church members, and built over 5 years. In 1956, 30 years after the little white building moved corners and was enhanced by the addition of the chapel, what we know as the Education Building opened its doors and welcomed bustling children and eager adults. Imagine the growing anticipation as hammers rang and boards became walls. Imagine the care that went into picking out just the right chairs and tables for the children and planning lessons that would both teach and deepen the faith of every churchgoer. Imagine that very first day of Sunday school in the new education building. The generations before us were always dreaming. Blueprints and drawings from as early as 1946 reflect a congregation with big dreams. Even before the education building was realized, plans for a larger worship space were percolating. Some of the ideas were to tear down the chapel, to add on to the chapel, or to build alongside the chapel. In the early 1980s, the church building was bursting at the seams, and it was clear something needed to be done. It was time to revisit the dreams from our past. And then, in 1986, 30 years after the education building was finished, and referring to plans laid out by earlier generations, the congregation broke ground for the new sanctuary with time, talent, and treasure, blood, sweat, and tears. The congregation made the dream to become Redmond's downtown church a reality, and now we love, serve, and grow in the heart of Redmond in a building we've been calling the New Building for over 40 years. As in earlier years, this wood and brick structure has become the home for many RUMC programs. Programs like Open Kitchen, Congregations for the Homeless Men, Emergency Winter Shelter, Heart to Heart, Threads and Patches, Redmond School Break Food Box Program. All these programs reflect our values and define RUMC as a loving, inclusive community that welcomes people exactly as they are, as God made them, no matter what they are carrying. As we celebrate the time, treasure, and talents of those generations before us, we recognize that buildings need programs, and programs need buildings. And buildings and programs come from people who are willing to dream and pray and listen for God's Spirit unfolding. Our church family has been dreaming and listening for 125 years, building buildings and programs that reflect our values to love one another, to do acts of justice, and to walk humbly with God. It all started with 13 families who created church in their homes. And then they built a little white building so they could connect with the community. And then the congregation turned the little white building into a bigger chapel so they could worship, socialize, and serve. And then the congregation built the education building to grow their Sunday school program. And then they built the new sanctuary to fulfill the dream of loving, serving, and growing as a downtown church. And the RUMC story does not end there. It's our turn to ask the questions. What will the wood and the brick of our church look like as we grow into the future? What will it hold? Can we be the same kind of stewards as the generations before us who entrusted us with this land, these buildings? Just imagine how the story could continue. And then, in 2021, the people of RUMC, well, what is, are, and then.